Well, welcome to the Scaling Tech Dojo podcast. I'm your host, Mark Morman, and today we're diving deep into the world of scaling SaaS for enterprise IT and the profound impact of AI on business transformation. I'm thrilled to have Bill Stark, president of Cognition Foundry, with us. Bill, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. For our listeners, Bill brings over 25 years of deep technical expertise from the IT security space, including a significant tenure at IBM. Cognition Foundry, under Bill's leadership, is dedicated to creating nurturing collaborative partnerships that empower businesses to fulfill missions that contribute to a better world. My background is also rooted in IT and cyber leadership, helping companies build predictable sales engines, and I'm having these conversations to get insights into the challenges and opportunities in this space, which helps me better serve my clients. Bill, your LinkedIn posts often highlight the strategic shifts that businesses, you know, need to make in this AI driven era, particularly around a digital transformation and business agility. And I'm especially keen to explore how Cognition Foundry helps mid market companies leverage AI to overcome growth plateaus. So you've had a remarkable career from your extensive background at IBM to co-founding Cognition Foundry. What was the driving force behind this evolution? And how is your personal mission, to love people? I'm using, the words from, your motto by encouraging, empowering, and equipping them to realize their dreams, shaped Cognition Foundry's corporate mission.
Well, it's a good question, Mark. I definitely enjoyed the nearly 25 years I spent at IBM. And what I enjoyed most there was the people. Frankly, a lot of the work I did was not that gratifying. There were seasons where I pushed spreadsheets around and seasons where I lived on airplanes. And some of that stuff occurred for me as drudgery. And I kind of lived that work life balance concept where, work was work and that's how you pay the bills. And then you have life on the evenings and weekends and you do the things that fulfill you then. And I kind of filled my tank through volunteerism and coaching youth sports and things like that. But I gradually started to feel, I don't know, like I was dying inside. I wasn't getting life from work. I was doing well. I was succeeding. I was a highly rated employee and kept getting promotions and that kind of stuff, but it just wasn't filling my cup. And when it came time for my time at IBM to end, I resigned from IBM to join Cognition Foundry because I had kind of become switched on through talking with some mentors and some clients actually and some partners at IBM. I met people who had figured out that you can do what you were made to do and make money doing it. So the first challenge was figure out, well, what is my mission? What am I made to do? And so I did that work and I I discovered that I'm most alive when I'm encouraging, empowering, and equipping others. And specifically when I'm really on fire for what they're trying to accomplish. And that ranges from, I still coach football and that, sometimes I'm on mission when I'm helping a 14-year-old learn some techniques so they can compete in football because they love football. And I see that happen when I see a kid take a drill and apply it on the field. It gives me joy. It's the same idea now at Cognition Foundry. If I meet someone who's an aspiring impact founder and says, I want to stop ocean plastic, but I need to make a living too. How do I do that? Helping that person figure out how to create the impact they want in the world with a market-driven solution that will generate the funds necessary both to create the impact and provide for everybody in the ecosystem, including the founder. Solving that puzzle and that riddle is really life-giving to me. And that's how we do that at Cognition Foundry is we focus on the impact, focus on the change that they're trying to make, but we use technology, expertise, and really our own passion to make that happen. So we'll build software, we do startup consulting, helping people do their foundational documents, raising money, that kind of stuff. So that desire to encourage, empower, equip turned into the corporate mission of nurturing collaborative partnerships.
Well, that shift makes sense. I mean, how you describe that. Yeah, you mentioned, in our pre-chat that the impact space has shifted. AI has fundamentally, changed your business model. Could you elaborate on this pivot in making or moving from building software for Fortune 200 companies and coaching founders on MVP development to now focusing on mid-market companies?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like take your own advice. So when I talk to an impact founder, part of the advice that we give them when they're looking for a startup is you've got to find a problem that people are willing to pay you to solve. pretty basic business principle, right? You may
Yeah.
have a really cool idea and you have a vision for what the world, I always tell founders, ideas and outcomes are easy, but they need a product to make them real. And that leads them down a path of, okay, I need to understand the market, understand their problems, and then solve their problems. And that's how you create monetization. That's how you create revenue. Well, when we saw this shift from the previous cycle or previous process of I've got a business idea, I build a pitch deck, I go raise a bunch of money, then I hire a bunch of software developers to build my code, and then I take it to market, and then I get that whole process. We made money on that process. We made money on those software development contracts. When AI came along, it changed that whole model around, and less people were asking for monolithic software builds. So we took our own advice and we surveyed the market and said, what are the problems that people are willing to pay to have fixed? And what we discovered was, as you described, mid-market, small to medium-sized companies. So we're talking 10 million in revenue up to maybe 100 million. A lot of those companies, if they're growing, they're doing well, they are experiencing a couple of phenomena. One is their systems worked when they were small, but now they've grown. And those systems, like often just desktop software and lots of people exchanging documents through email or shared workspaces, that kind of stuff. Those systems worked when they were small, but now they're getting big. They're starting to be strained. And really the only solution, they kind of had some bad choices. It was like, bad, worse, worst was their choices. And, one of those choices is hire low skilled people to do menial tasks, like literally push the buttons to make the systems talk to each other or make the data flow, make the workflow happen. That's one option. Another option that is really unattainable for those small companies is buy some software, buy some SaaS. It's a big ERP system or, like an SAP, but they're priced out of that. Or even if they're not priced out of it, there were risks inherent in that approach that were unacceptable to them. At IBM, I lived through forced marches of software adoption and experienced that in a giant corporation had a lot of control and a lot of diversified labor. They had the ability to say, you're all going to change your process, you're all going to change your tools, and you've got 30 days to do it, and that's what you're doing.
Right.
That doesn't always work in a mid-market company. The employee turnover that you can drive your people out, right? Like, I've done it this way for 20 years. Why do I have to stop doing it my way and do it this way because the software says do it that way? So, there are problems with adoption because of business process disruption or employee dissatisfaction. So they didn't choose that. And, the other choice is let stuff break, and that inhibits growth.
Right.
Proposals don't go out in time. Whatever needs to be delivered isn't delivered right. Those things start to happen. So we saw that they had this big problem. They didn't have a solution, but enter AI. And what we realized was two things. One, they were starting to solve some of these problems on their own, albeit in what in some cases is a chaotic and unorganized and kind of dangerous way.
Huh.
You can use AI to create solutions in a much more affordable way that solve those problems. So rather than renting a big SaaS product,
Yeah.
you could start to build your own solutions internally.
Yeah, another great good yeah, it makes sense. So your LinkedIn, often discusses the practical application of AI, in business. So how are you seeing AI agents and other AI driven solutions fundamentally change how mid-market companies operate, especially those whose technology wasn't originally built for growth? And you may have answered some of this already in that previous answer. I don't know, but do you want to go a little bit further, a little bit deeper on that?
What I'm seeing, like a pattern that's emerging is in we talked to a lot of owner operators and like their top people. And usually there's one person who's all in on AI, somebody who's got Claude, maybe the company's upgraded to co-work or to like a Teams type subscription, but somebody has chosen an LLM, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, and they've really geeked out on it, and they're solving their problems.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I've got all this data and I can't run reports on it. So they're using AI to query the data or whatever. That individual contributor is killing it. I was
Yeah.
just talking to a director this morning, teed up for him because he can comb through that data and
Yeah.
then matching that to customer pains. And he's doing all this cool stuff. But his peers are like, I don't even use ChatGPT.
Right.
And so as the leader, he's the guy's like, well, what do I do with this? Like, I don't want to hamstring the innovator, but now I've got a political kind of an HR problem because I've got one employee working laps around everyone else, but the others saying, I don't know how to use AI. So he's got some tough choices. Like, do I teach everybody in my business AI Do I slow this guy down? Do I let this gap exist? And he doesn't know what to do. That's what's happening with a lot of people now is you've got an early adopter of LLMs and they're working on their own, but the leadership team may not have visibility into that. They may not have control of that. And a specific concern expressed this morning was this sales rep is essentially building his own IP on my dime in my company, and I don't have access to it. And I don't know how it works. And I can't share with other employees. So that's a concern.
Yeah. So what's cognition's role in that scenario?
Well, we strive to help employers like the owner operator
Yeah.
foster innovation
Okay.
without the chaos and the risk that's involved. So, we're a couple of seasoned IT veterans, right? You might remember a technology called Lotus Notes Domino. Do you remember Lotus Notes?
I do. I do. Yes. I never used it, but I used to call service IBM. Well, we talked about this, at RTP, right? So
Right, right. So many of our listeners may not be familiar with this technology, but in a nutshell, there was a technology that, IBM bought Lotus and then added Domino onto it. And the value prop was pretty simple and compelling. And this was like early .com days when everybody was trying to figure out the internet and websites and just starting to put their content online. And, I actually had a marketing consulting agency at the time, and IBM was my customer before I joined as an employee. And there were a lot of us making good money, basically writing HTML. It was pretty basic at the time, but my first job at IBM was a webmaster, and my only skill was HTML 3.0 and Notepad and Telnet. I knew how to FTP stuff to a server. That was my my big power. And
yeah,
IBM came along and said,
yeah.
"What's that?"
So back in that day, that was the leading edge, or I mean, you were, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, IBM called it a hot skill. It was a hot skill, right?
hot skill.
HTML is
There
a
we
hot
go.
skill.
Okay.
So IBM came out with Lotus Notes Domino and said, you don't need those guys like Bill anymore because now with Notes Domino, any business person can not only create a database without being a trained DBA, they can create content using kind of word processor type skills. So they didn't need to know markup language, and they could publish that content as a web page. So the value prop was everybody in your business can create web content now. And that created a ton of chaos. And I was in IBM I transitioned to become an IBM employee by the time this really played out. And I was a notes application developer. Took all of, I think, 2 weeks to get that skill. So it still wasn't very deep, but definitely wasn't a technical skill, but it was enough to be dangerous. All of a sudden, there were not thousands, but millions of web pages on IBM.com. I remember the first time I saw the stat, it was kind of a warning bell from corporate was there we have 1.5 million pages on our domain, and corporate was saying, we don't know what they are and we don't control them. Every manager had a server under their desk and every department was launching websites. IBM spent a ton of money reining that in, and they did it with a heavy hand because they had a ton of risk.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential liability there, customer data, all this stuff that it really freaked the attorneys and the accountants out, right? So when they brought it all back in, Notes Domino made everybody an innovator. When they reined it all in, they killed all the innovation. And the really important common thread was with Notes Domino, what they realized was someone who's, for example, a supply chain expert, they were now able to build technology to support their workflow or their job or whatever by talking directly to the machine. The domain expertise of a supply chain manager didn't get lost in translation as it did when they would talk to a business analyst and then a requirements documenter and then a software developer, none of whom had the expertise of the supply chain, professional.
Yeah.
So they were like, this is great because it does exactly what I want. Both of those phenomena, the sprawl and the chaos and putting the subject matter expert closer to the actual code development, those are both what's happening right now with AI.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking, Bill. I was thinking history repeats itself. Yeah, that's what I was just
Absolutely.
thinking.
So what we're trying to do is learn from the lessons from the past, having been, having Notes Domino scars all over me, and remembering it was kind of sad when we had to IBM had to shut things down that were working okay or maybe working great, but they had to homogenize. And it was like a step back. The business flow took a big hit because the governance took precedence. So they said, we don't care if it's going to take you twice as long to do your work. We got to get you compliant. What we're trying to do is not do that to people. So in the case of that early adopter employee, how do we harness their innovation, get it under control of the company, of the leadership, but not stifle the creative energy and not create a gap between the subject matter expert and the tools that are being created? That's what we do when we work with customers.
I was thinking about guardrails, right? I mean, that's, putting some guardrails in, right?
Absolutely. It's as simple as maybe a governance layer that,
Yeah.
one customer talked about, he likes to do management by walking around, right? So he's walking around the floor and he looked over an employee's shoulder and saw that an employee was uploading customer data, including PII, into a public LLM. And he was like, I don't really know what the risk profile is, but this feels like it might be a problem. So
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, hi, thanks for that. That was excellent. So many mid-market companies struggle with inefficiencies. Like sales teams spending time on administrative tasks rather than making sales calls.
Well, yeah, that is going back to using desktop software, right? When someone's using a Word, like Word, Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF, and they've got these different kind of disaggregated tools, and they've got to copy data from one to the next. There's some pretty simple, straightforward solutions that can be developed. Some of it's awareness that the company they don't do tech, so they don't know that this could be automated, but the employee just senses it. I had a mentor in my early days at IBM who was a guy that he literally wrote the book on Unix. He told me that his rule was is if he repeats the same keystroke sequence 3 times, he made a mistake. He should have written a script for that. So he knew as an engineer that if a human is pushing the same keys over and over, we're doing it wrong. The computers were
Right.
supposed to do that for us, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when we canvass the staff for problems, that's what we look for. A situation where the employee has a sense just from their innate knowledge of what computers are supposed to do. Like, I shouldn't be having to do this. The computer should do this. I just don't know how to make that happen. That's where we jump in, understand the workflow, identify whether it's an integration with an API or if it's a mail merge. I mean, pretty simple, not even AI stuff, but just showing them that we can actually automate that stuff. And then the bonus for us is we can use AI as a partner in the solutions we build, which accelerates time to value and reduces the cost so that we can more easily match expenses to revenue for a medium-sized company that doesn't have a multi-million-dollar innovation budget. And we can do that in a slow, kind of controlled way so that we minimize business process disruption, so that the salesperson's not saying, great new tool, now I got to spend a week learning how to use it and I can't call customers. So you really didn't solve my near-term problem. And that was the case when you drop a CRM on somebody and they have to change how they do business. Yeah, in 6 months it's going to be great, but getting there is really painful, and you might lose your best salesperson in the process.
Yeah. So I guess you get to understand, what their business processes and data workflows and look at friction. And I guess that's what you're doing. I guess that's what I'd be doing.
Absolutely, and you've got to take into account because again, we have this mission derived DNA in us, right? We're
Huh.
so even though when we're
I
doing
love the thought.
well, and I feel like that was part of the reason we chose SMB was that's the largest employer in the world, is
Yeah.
small to medium sized businesses.
Yeah.
And there is a disruption happening, and everybody knows jobs are at stake and jobs are at risk. We believe that we can help the small and medium sized businesses thrive in the era of AI that
Yeah.
will actually create more jobs for people and better jobs. So less mundane tasks, more high value tasks. In the case of the salesperson, one we were able to help, top sales rep at this company, spending 4 hours on menial stuff that wasn't doing very good, and she's a commission based salesperson. When we shrunk her time, her administrative time, that freed up more time for her to sell more, which her boss loved and she loved because her commissions go up, right? So we're helping people with technology. And importantly, when you approach this, you've got to take into account how this is occurring for the individual contributor because
Right.
everybody's freaking out that AI is taking their job, right?
Right. Yep.
So we like to meet that fear head on
Yeah.
and show them that, it is, we're not going to say that some jobs won't be eliminated because some jobs are only there because of the friction. And you remove that job does become obsolete. Fortunately, that's the minority case. The majority case is no, what's in here is still more valuable than the AI.
Right. That's
Because
right.
if you don't have what's in here, the AI is going to produce slop. So we always strive to keep a human in the loop, and we focus on removing the low value work so that more of the high value work gets done, and that puts the employee at ease and helps with the company's adoption of AI because they don't feel like their boss is trying to replace their job. They see that their boss is trying to give them their weekends back,
Right.
get them out of the office at a decent hour
Yeah.
and show them how to meet their performance objectives more effectively, which is good for their career, good for their compensation.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Hey, listen, you've observed that the sales cycle. I think we talked about this on the pre-podcast chat that the sales cycle hasn't shrunk proportionally to the ticket size
Has he?
in this new consulting focused model. So, what are the key strategies that Cognition Foundry employs, to navigate these longer sales cycles, and demonstrate value effectively to mid-market decision makers who have budget?
I'm of two minds when you ask me that question, Mark. One is when I get it figured out, I'll tell you. The other is,
It's a progressive elaboration.
yeah, well, I mean, and are you asking me for my secret sauce? That
No, I'm not going to do that. No, that's
yeah. So the sales cycle question is a challenging one because we're selling something that the shiny object is AI, right? That's why people are talking to you. And because it's so new and so like not only is it not well defined what it is, it changes every day. So, I've had the experience where I'll talk to a customer on Monday, like on a discovery call, or just even an intro call, and start to ask about their challenges. How are you using AI? The same questions you're asking me, like, what are you guys doing with agents and that kind of stuff?
yeah.
And I'll find out the status quo. I'll come back at the end of the week ready to make a proposal. And then the customer say, oh, by the way, in the 4 days since, we've solved that with Claude. It's no longer a problem. So you're kind of chasing your tail a little bit because as soon as the customer vocalizes the problem, they start to think about the solution. And because of AI, they've got a great iteration partner.
Yeah,
And they go to
exactly.
AI and say, well, how should I solve this? And Claude lays out a plan and says, would you like me to do that for you? So that is a challenge. So one of the things we like to do is actually get customers together. And it might be high risk. It's a little bit risky of a proposition, but we bring customers together in one Zoom session and we just have them talk to each other. And the thinking there is we get the customers to actually drive the early stages of the sales cycle. They do the awareness piece. Executive A talks about a problem they have. Executive B gets sensitized to a problem. I've got that problem too. I didn't even think about that. But they heard a customer talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Another one talks about a solution that creates awareness. Someone else demonstrates the art of the possible. These are all things you got to do in the sales cycle. But if we can get the customers to talk to each other, then that matures a little bit. And we're very open. So we'll share like, this is the coolest new tool, whatever. We show people stuff because we believe that they'll start innovating. They'll start working on it on their own. So I'm not spending time talking to them, but then they're going to hit a ceiling. Because just like with Notes Domino, it did 80-90% of the stuff really well, and the last 10 to 20% was really, really hard. Same thing with vibe coding and agents and everything else. You can get a lot of stuff done really fast, but to get customer-ready deliverables or to get things to a point that you would actually introduce them into your whole operation, they need an expert for that. Part of the learning is let them work for a while on their own. So you're not taking up time educating them. They're self-educating. Let them define the ceiling and then come back to you when they're ready for you to get them across the finish line.
Yeah, I like that masterminding. I mean, that's good. And it's you're indirectly providing value. It's you're being a partner. I like that. From your perspective, what are the most common misconceptions, or biggest hurdles that mid-market leaders face when trying to implement AI solutions for agility and scaling?
Well, it kind of depends. It's very somewhat individualized. So you've got people who are like, I don't. It's like the three classes. I think I've read this online a few times. The three groups of people. The way you can group people into three groups as regards AI and generative AI specifically LLMs, not machine learning. We're talking about the new stuff. There's like the enthusiast adopter who's got agents running all day, right? That's one camp. There's the people in the middle who are interested but a little suspicious and skeptical. Like I'm using AI, but the stuff I get out of it's kind of garbage. I'm not sure this is really going to be. This might just be a cool trick, but it's not really productive for my business.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are like anti, like I don't want to touch it, right? What we're seeing when it comes to adoption is all three of those people exist in the same company. And so when you go to roll something out, you have to account for all three user types. If your leader, depending on which of those groups the executive is in, that greatly shapes how adoption's working. Obviously, right?
And yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. That's good. Yeah, just that there's the early adopters, laggards. I mean, there's ways to go and define those personas, but it's more of a so persona is the right word, but anyway. So the Cognition Founder, they bring you bring a team. You got a team of 40 senior software engineers to bear on these AI challenges. So how do you translate that high level expertise into practical, actionable solutions for owner operated mid market businesses. And maybe if you want to share a success story that maybe exemplify, might.
Well, where our business now is the 40 senior software engineers who've, been writing code for 20 years, they're still building enterprise software. So they're using AI to accelerate their throughput, but they're creating stuff that's got to be ISO 27000 compliant. It's HIPAA, PCI, PII. You can't have AI slop in that code.
Right.
They can build faster, but because they're senior software engineers, that human in the loop means that it's still trustworthy code. Those are not the skills that we're selling to the mid-market. In the mid-market, it's more straight up automation and integration and AI management, let's call it AI adoption management. That, I think the question was, how do we demonstrate that to the prospect? How do we show them the potential? Something along those lines, Mark. Really, it's staying away from talking about technology and it's focusing on impact on the business. And
Outcomes.
with most owner operators, we want to start with something like revenue
Yeah.
and get as close to revenue as we can. And the owner operator will often envision the outcome they want. Like, if I could get these proposals out the door faster, I can make this much more money. They see the after state. They don't, as soon as we start talking about technology and how we're going to do that, that's what elongates the sales cycle, because now we're asking someone to imagine something that we can't show them because it's got to be invented, right? So we can describe a future state, but we can't really show it to them until we make it. So that is a challenge. But the success we've had is when we focus on a specific problem that's a blocker to revenue, say, like the salesperson's example, and we demonstrate verbally to the decision maker that we can shrink that time in a way that makes the person more effective and reduces the risk of error, less copying and pasting, transposing, whatever. That's usually enough. And we have to price the initial offering low enough that it's one of those things where it's like, hey, just trust me, give us a little bit of a budget, let us show you what we can do, and then we turn the crank again.
Yeah.
It's different than creating a clickable prototype and a big demo and like literally painting a picture for them. That was kind of the old model, right? Like, we'll write you some custom code and here's what your app is going to look like. And it's going to do this. We skip that stage now. It's a PowerPoint. We say, current state, the good, better, best, current state, later state. And the customer says, yeah, I'll pay X to get from here to there. And if you give me from here to there, then I'll do X plus.
Yeah. Good. Good. So, your posts often on LinkedIn, they often emphasize the importance of strategic partnerships. How do you foster these collaborative relationships with your clients to ensure their missions are fulfilled and they achieve the sustainable growth they're after?
Well, yeah, shifting back to really the impact space, we frequently we'll align our incentives through one mechanism or another. And a lot of times that could be equity for services. So we'll have a blend of cash and equity in our delivery. And that makes it really clear to the founder that we're literally invested in the outcome. So that's one like really hard way to do it is, hey, if I've got a couple of points of your company, I'm
Directly,
not
yeah.
here to lead you dry. I'm here to get the hockey stick, right? I want to get the upside. So that's like the silver bullet to aligning outcome incentives, right?
Alignment, yeah.
Yeah, total alignment. But another way to do that is by really taking on embracing the outcome that they want and then bringing our network to bear to make them successful. So that's just introductions, right? Hey, we
Yeah.
know you're trying to get in this market in Southeast Asia. We have a customer in Southeast Asia who's got active operations, who has a tangential aligned mission. They're serving the same population, but a different set of needs, that kind of thing. We'll make an intro so that they can collaborate and work together because we see our ecosystem of customers, people are mission aligned, I guess is the way to say it. Like, person might be trying to solve poverty. Someone else is focused on education, very complementary, objectives, and they make natural partners. So when a founder realizes that we're not like trying to keep them close to the best and only look at us, like we're the answer to all of your problems, which is what an extractive company would do, right? You need help penetrating that market? Hire us. We'll help you penetrate that market. If we instead say, no, we'll introduce you to someone for free and help you penetrate that market, then they realize we proved that we're actually focused on the outcome, not focused on extracting as much value from the founder as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the value of partnerships for sure. So, in our pre-chat, you'd highlighted the need for getting customers, on the phone. and ensuring salespeople are making sales calls. I know that I have an AI based sales development rep. An offering that we have. Also, an AI based sales call analyzer and an AI based voice receptionist that um, but so those are a couple of offers, but that we have. But I'm just thinking of how that would fit into Cognition Foundry's approach to optimizing that sales, process and ensuring efficiency for your clients. I know that's a kind of a question. I mean, so yeah, so AI based sales development rep as opposed to, a sales rep, jumping on the phone, or I don't know. So how do you feel about AI based, or AI being involved in the sales process and doing and analyzing conversations like transcripts and then if missing phone calls does impact your business, having an AI receptionist, and maybe you do already have it, I don't know. Well, I mean, are you guys doing that?
Yeah, we don't use them as Cognition Foundry, but we're certainly enabling our clients with those. Uh, we're a boutique shop. I'm not looking for volume. A lot of our business is referral based, so we don't have the outbound sales challenge of because the products we sell. But depending on the product, I can see for some of our customers, it's of immense value. Commoditized products where it's not an emotional sale, it's not a sensitive topic. People are okay talking to a robot. They really just want information. It's obviously a big part, as you know, of the sales cycle is just educating the consumer.
Yeah,
And if it's $100 product and it takes an hour of education, that's a big problem, right? So, getting the customer the knowledge they need to make a purchase decision through an automated sales rep is a great solution. When the solution's a little more complex or sensitive, maybe is a word for it, maybe the automation serves as the sales assistant and prepares the rep. That's kind of, you really have to customize it based on the culture of the company, their brand. Most of these owner operators have so much of their identity tied up in their business.
yeah,
The idea of a robot speaking on their behalf to customers is abhorrent. Like I don't want that. But we show them how there's a role for AI and there's still a role for your sales rep.
yeah,
I've got a customer who recently came out and posted on social media that they will never use AI generated images in their marketing. They market a physical product and they see their competitors using AI to generate you know, versions of their competitor's product supposedly deployed. And it's just a pure fabrication. And they're taking a very clear stand that we will never generate images of our products and put them on the internet with AI. We will only ever take real pictures. So
yeah,
there's some real cultural hard lines that employers will take. And so for us, the key is to understand the customer's position
yeah.
and insert the automation at the appropriate level to honor their culture, maintain their brand integrity, but also increase their sales reps efficiency.
Yeah, the example you use is the $100 requiring an hour. I was thinking of that's for like a 24-hour receptionist, being able to go in and chat answers and having that knowledge base that you train, a small LLM. So I'm thinking that there is some use cases there. But hey, listen, so looking ahead now, what's next for Cognition Foundry?
Well, we're going to keep using that discipline of identifying problems that people are willing to pay to fix. Because in this time we're in right now, lashing yourself to the mast of any given ship, you got a ship that's sailing. We got wind in the sails. We're making money. If you start to tie yourself to the mast, when that ship suddenly starts going under, you're going under with it. So you've got to hold it lightly. So today we have an approach that normally I would have said in a few months, but it could be in a few days. The releases from these technology providers, like the big LLMs,
Yeah,
can be so transformative that
yeah,
if you're not agile and ready to find the next problem, like every time Claude has a release or ChatGPT has a release and they release something new, they solve a bunch of new problems. Our job is to identify what new problems are created by those solutions, because there's always something. There's always something. So what's next is staying ahead of the curve and paying attention to what's being released, but listening to our customers. And really, it's really listening to our customers, because that's who tells you who's got the problem, what the problems are, right? They're living the problems. So what's next for us is continue to focus on real value and solving problems that matter to customers.
this has been a fantastic conversation, Bill. For our listeners, who would want to learn more about Cognition Foundry and your work, where can they find you online?
Cognition Foundry, cognitionfoundry.com. We kind of have a sub brand. I'm wearing the shirt right now that, we're still trying to figure out how to market the company as, impact founder enablers and,
Yeah,
and automation. My marketing guy assures me he's got this figured out, but we're too busy helping customers to implement this. So cognitionfoundry.com or myaibiz.com. If you're interested, really just want to talk about AI, go to my AI biz. If you want to save the world, go to cognitionfoundry.com.
gotcha. Okay, all right. And so you've clearly articulated the challenges and opportunities when scaling sales for mid-market SaaS companies, and that's precisely where my company, I Scale Out, comes in. We specialize in building predictable sales pipelines for B2B software and service companies, just leveraging tools, some of the tools I mentioned. And it's not limited to that. But what I like to do for my podcast guests as a thank you is put together a custom, AI first revenue playbook. And would you be against a 10-minute follow-up call, strings attached to help me understand your business processes? I could put together a playbook that's tailored specifically for you.
Sure. Sounds good.
Let's do that. Let's get something on the calendar. What is your? I'm going to go ahead and I'll stop the
Okay.